Hi. Thank you guys for coming out to the movie, to the film. It took us a long time, 9, 10 years, and it was a collaborative process with the convicts inside, with this group here, all of us here, putting in whatever it is that we had in us to make this kind of happen, and to the convicts that are both outside and inside, who helped us do that. So
it's remarkable. I mean, congratulations on the film. I'm going to begin with a few questions, but I'd really love to hear your questions and to involve you in this Q&A. Firstly, I wondered, how you got access and whether you've been through this process also.
Yeah, my brothers, went through first. My dad went through first on the first one that was in like 2000, and then he came. This whole thing functions by word of mouth, and you experience it, and then what happens is you might tell people in your life about it, and some people might have serious judgments about it, and then 1 or 2 people might say, well, that sounds interesting. It's impossible to explain, and this is why we filmed it. But my brother went in, my younger brother went in, and I actually said no twice because I had all my judgments about prison. I didn't know anything about it beyond what I saw on television. And so I had to recognize that that was all fiction in my head, and I had to confront what that was. And then Gethin came in. I would also like to say this has been sort of a collaboration, here in this country, in New York, on the West Coast, the East Coast. I just met the man who I've spoken to him, but he's the guy that did this is Adrian. He did the music, the soundtrack, and this is the first time I'm meeting him. And so we all put this together, and I think he did a beautiful job. So.
And for me, it's nuts because I'm English, and it's watching this with an English crowd. This is the first time we've shown it in the UK. It's fucking wild. It's fucking wild. That's all I got to say.
I've got a pretty loose question. Obviously, it's a very emotional journey for the people going through this process, but for you as a team and the crew and you as a director, I wondered what your own emotional journey was, whether it was one of going through a process of fear with the team or of love. It would be great if you could describe what you went through watching this.
Both, I would say, mostly fear. I think every time that I would go into the prison, it's a new experience, and I'm always afraid of, the unknown. And then when I leave after the 4 days are done, and I know that the men who have been inside, these guys can attest to that. It's always scary. You walk in, it's a scary, scary place. This is level 4. And so the guys that go into this room, it's important to know that those guys are the ones who are consciously wanting to stop the life that they're living out on the yard. Out on the yard, it's racially segregated. It's segregated by gang. You cannot show emotions like you saw Kiki. Imagine if you could not, say your mother died or your father, and you are in a place where you cannot show the full spectrum of human emotion. And this is the only room in that prison that they can do that. Because if you do it out in the yard, it's a sign of weakness, and then you're vulnerable. And so some of these guys watching these guys to sort of break maybe after 10 years of not crying or 20 years of not crying. And we do that, frankly, on the outside, too. I mean, Chris is a perfect example. He couldn't remember the last time he actually shed tears because we sort of don't support that. But you guys can talk about your experiences, but for me, being in that room, it just kind of is earth-shattering every time I go in, and I just know that as far as filming it was concerned, I would take time off of work, and I know that my brothers have the same experience. You take time off of work, You come back and people say, "Where did you go?" And I was just, prison. Yeah, and they have their own judgments. Like, what were you doing in there? You think you can help these guys? Like, are you a therapist? What can you do? What do they deserve it? These men did. Every man in that group, for the most part, with the exception of one, I mean, they have taken a person's life, who are the convicts, and these are some of the hard choices that they've made in their life and want to do something about it. And this is the only place they get a chance to do that. So you guys can talk about your experience as well, if you have them.
I mean, I'll offer this. For me, what came up for me was I would go into that room, and it was like witnessing a miracle. Okay, I saw a transformation I didn't think was possible with people who scared the hell out of me, and it happened every time I was on the inside. Yeah. Every time. And I felt like I had to tell someone outside that group. And every time I did, it fell on deaf ears. No one would listen, and the more I spoke, the less they listened. Mm-hmm. So it made sense to just show people and let them judge for themselves. Yeah.
Why do you think it is that British society, English society, American society, why are we all so scared of crying? I mean, especially men. You know, why is it such a shame for a man to shed tears in public, for goodness sake? Why do we have this taboo about it? Can you explain what it is?
Absolutely.
Glad someone can.
There's an old Russian myth called the Maiden Tsar that came to my attention through two fine writers for waking up. It's fine going to see The Matrix, it's great. But you got to do it. Watching the movie isn't enough, that's just the map. Robert Bly and Marion Woodman wrote a book based on the Maiden Tsar. It's one of those disturbing fairy, F-I-R-I-E, the old spelling, fairy tales, which still is true today, about young Ivan who has a pin in his neck. We are all, and I have been weeping and sobbing my fucking guts out up there because I've been watching all of you, because we were at the back. And I saw all of you watch this. How many of us were welcomed in all our soul magnificence when we were young? How many of us just got told, yes, and all the way, because you're here for something, and we need you? And these little ones look up and go, great, I want to get there, and I know how. I know how, but you need to show me the mirror. In our culture, we have learned over a long time how to survive in the cold. And this is why we evolved a very super smart consciousness. There is not a nation on this planet that does not manifest this super smart consciousness, but it happened to evolve in the pioneering of the cold countries. Our emotions have been turned off over 10,000 years. We have evolved carefully, prudently, and necessarily. Everyone in this room has evolved an off switch. And I'm a musician and an artist of import because I just don't have an off switch. And I never have.
Yeah, thank you.
Allow what Chris allows. Have people hold your back who you love and trust, and the grief will come because this is the time as a collective we are going to mourn what we didn't know was wrong before. Bedlam, insanity, asylums, and how we're treating the aged today are going to lead to incredible shame. And these are the years, and it's these films and these artworks. Is that okay?
Thank you very much.
If you just wait for the mic a second.
My voice is quite loud, but I don't mind. Thank you. That was one of the most spectacular things I've seen. Incredibly powerful and
Thank you.
Gobsmacking.
Thank
It's a
you.
British term. 2 questions. One is, 3 brothers doing it. Did any family stuff come out while you were there?
Probably not while we were filming, per se. Definitely leading up to it. I mean, there was a year's gap between my father first going in and myself going in and my brothers going in before we even had the idea to film. But we were living in a house for 5 or 6 years up in the hills, in post-production, trying to get this thing out, to birth this thing. And yeah, it was, it was interesting. It was definitely intense.
Yes, we almost killed each other a couple of times. but that's only because, I mean, my dad started doing this work, and he really didn't, he had a father, but he didn't have a father. He grew up in the south side of Chicago, and he basically from, 7 years old had to start taking care of himself. How's he going to get to school? How are you going to get clothes? How are you going to feed yourself? So he never really had a childhood. And parenting is hard. You do the best you can. And he just came home one day when I was like 15. We were all, similar ages. And he just sat down at the couch and he just started crying. And it was because he kind of started doing this work on the outside. And so our family, my mother started doing the work. We started doing the work when we were teenagers. And this was stuff on the outside. And my dad would just bring us to different places. We're an unusual family. So our I don't know, every time we had an issue, it was in the living room and in a circle like that, I mean, not like struggling.
What's the feeling?
Yes, I know. So we're an unusual case. We're an unusual case.
Just don't know your dad's.
Yeah, I will offer this also. Our father was the man who did the African chant, so he was also a part of this. And our uncle was in the circle too. So it was a family affair, and yes, there were some conflagrations, but we sort of learned how to work through that in a way that we can still, carry our bond into the future and be productive.
And our mom was behind the scenes telling us, don't give up. Don't give up. I know it's been 9 years, but keep going.
I don't want to hog it, but there's one more thing also I want to know. The people that came from outside into the I'm going to say university, into the prison. I teach at university, that's why it's like a prison. No, it's not. How this film's going to be shown publicly, so how their raw emotions are going to be available for the whole world to see. So what counselling have they had, or how are they going to deal with the fact that everyone can see?
Are you talking about the guys from the inside or the guys from the outside, or
guys
both?
from the outside that
Subjects,
came in?
the three subjects?
Yeah.
I mean, we conducted a lot of interviews, and we really drilled home sort of what the hopeful endpoint was, and that's where we're at now. We've screened it for all of them. I think Chris is the only one who chose not to see it. He just says, "I remember what it was, and I don't need to see it again." I feel like when we screen back in Chicago, where he's from, like he will see it at that point. But that was also real. I don't know how they're going to deal with it. But the 3 of the inmates that were in that circle are now on the outside, and they have all at some time or another come to screenings, and they have been able to kind of live through it, and it's touched them. And we were in San Francisco, I think, last night or the night before. I'm mixing my days, but they were up here on stage and speaking from their hearts, and they know that in order to keep this going, if they can be a small piece of it, their whatever sort of fear of exposure that they have, it's worth it.
I have a mic. Shall I ask a question? Great film, very visceral. I love the physicality of it. Can you tell me something about how this work came about? Who came up with it? How it's the origins of it and that kind of stuff.
Yes, it's if I told you the whole story, you guys kind of wouldn't believe me, but it's true, and that's the thing that as far as doing a film, that was one of the things that initially I think attracted all of us, is because Rob the guy that looks like ZZ Top, he's one of the founders. The guy that was reciting the poem, he's one of the founders. There's another man there. And then there was a photograph of a guy in a chair, and that's Patrick Nolan. And just briefly, there was a riot in 1997. It was one of the worst riots they had in there. Eight convicts were shot. One of them died. Guards were injured. And Patrick Nolan, he was from Canada, and he was a heavyweight boxer. He saw one of his friends, who happened to be in one of the Mexican gangs, get shot, and then he died. The whole prison went on lockdown for 7 months, and in there he got a hold of a book by Viktor Frankl, who is one of the third Viennese schools of psychology. He is a man, he's Jewish. He went to concentration camps, and he lived the discipline of what it was in there, and it helped him survive. And that is that man has to have, and by man I mean all of us, women and men, have to have meaning in their lives. And what you don't, nobody can take the meaning from you. You have to create it yourself. And so Patrick Nolan somehow was able to see the parallel between this man who was in the camps and had everything removed from him, taken from him, and himself, who was in a camp of a different sort and had everything taken away from him. Now, he made the choice to be there, and he recognizes that, and that's a lot of what his poetry is about. He started writing poetry. He dropped out of his gang. He was able to protect himself, because you become free meat on the yard if you don't have somebody protecting you, the gang, and he fought people off. After that, he just walked the yard and tried to enlist the shot callers to say, we got to do something where we can sort of, people have been, human beings have been sitting around in a circle for as long as there's been civilization. And before that, can we not do something like that in here? And perhaps we can kind of curb the violence, because a lot of us are never getting out, and we have to live here together. This is our house. So essentially, he got some of the main shot callers, which are the leaders of the gangs. If the leaders are doing it, then it trickles down, and nobody will say anything. It's heavily segregated by race and gang. He also wrote poetry. The gentleman who recited the poetry is a Stanford-educated accountant, and he is a Vietnam vet. That man just read his publication. They started writing, then they started visiting, and then through another series of events, that man met Rob, the guy with the beard, who is also a poet and an ex-con. They came together, and then there's a prison chaplain who's shown briefly. He's not, he doesn't have like lower thirds, but he was their guy on the inside. And then this unfolded like almost like a reverse heist movie, where they had to try and, over a number of years, about 10 years, break people into the prison to try and get civilians to start this program. And so the state doesn't pay for a dime. It is private citizens, and it is convicts working together, and it's restorative justice. This is what it is. It's people pay for it. This is people sort of coming together and saying, we can do something about it if we work together. One of Rob's quotes is, if enough of us pick up our piece of a problem, any problem, then you can, that's how you make the change. So there's more to it than that. We hope to make the film.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for making such an amazingly powerful film. I'm over here. Hi. And thank you to Luke for choosing such an amazing film, for programming it. I guess I could talk about your film for ages, and I'm lucky enough to work in film as a publicist, but also train as a psychotherapist, so it resonates with me in so many ways. And I'm incredibly excited about the therapeutic community in the UK seeing the film. And I guess I think I'm excited by, your response to being there every day and living with the fear of being in there every day, and how you maybe kind of managed that, or it manifested, talking about the fear that you faced, I guess.
I mean, I can say that So we shot this in what, 2009. It is terrifying going in there, but the first time that I went in was in 2001, and I think they started doing these in around 2019, 99. And what it is right now, it's ever evolving, and the yard is also ever evolving, and so that prison is a calmer. It's not calm, but it is a calmer place than it was when I first went in. When I first went in, I could not stop physically shaking. I grew up in the suburbs. I have no connection to prison whatsoever. And I just had to tell the inmate that I was paired with, like, I am freaked the fuck out, and he's like, I am too, but I can't show it, the more you go in, the less scary it gets. But I mean, it's still frightening to go in because it's prison. You don't know, you can't be complacent. I guess the other thing I'll say is, interacting with them over, it's pretty intimate, and 12-hour days, for 4 days in a row. Some of the, like, oh, you're an inmate thing kind of drops away, and so that fear does, in the one-on-one sort of situations, that will completely drop away, almost to the point where it's uncomfortable, because they'll be like, oh, what are you doing tonight? And then it's just like, oh, I'm going, you're like, oh, am I going to tell this guy I'm going to go get a steak? You know what I mean? And so it's a balance, I guess.
Hiya. I've been told...
Just wanted to say one more thing about the fear. So for me, I remember the first time I went in, and almost immediately the fear that I felt was that I'm going to have to go there. That was more scary than being surrounded by these, people who have murdered and killed. It was my own psychosis and my own fears and and the place that they were going to expect me to go to. I mean, that shit was fucking terrifying. I remember a point saying that I've been doing a lot of work on myself. I'm not going to probably do anything this weekend. And 20 minutes later, I was howling on the floor, howling, with like 4 guys holding me down, 4 inmates. And it was just one of the most cathartic experiences of my fucking life. I mean, it was life-changing, life-changing. There was something that had been buried deep inside me, which I got an opportunity to get out, and it hasn't come back.
I'm afraid we are running out of time. We've got time for one last question from this gentleman. He got his hands on the mic, so you can go for it.
But I'll try and keep it really brief.
Thank you. They'll be in the bar afterwards. I know there are a lot more questions out there, so please do grab these guys outside.
I'll try and keep it really short. That was amazing. What I found exceptional from the other films on the roster for this festival is the almost complete lack of filmmakers' voice. I think it's commendable in a way that you're giving the people that are being so brave and vulnerable, a voice to talk of their own. So thank you very much for that. But since you're here, and it's amazing you're here, I just wanted to get your opinion of what you want people to take away from the film.
Could we each answer that? That's a great question.
Yeah, for me, it simply is that I don't know any of you, but I'm pretty sure if we got a chance to talk one-on-one, we would, if we could get there, if we could trust you enough to get there, we would have the same things. We might have the same sort of issues, and it might be different. It might be that certain different things have happened to you, or I've been culturated in a different way, but it all boils down to the common denominator of the same stuff. And if we can empathize with one another, then you can bridge the gap. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're from, and what's happened to you. It's my pain to me is equal to whatever your pain is deep underneath all that. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess it would just be to do or say the thing that you're afraid to do or say to whoever it is, or because I never really, I don't really see it. I know it's a prison movie, but it's not, to me, it's not really a prison movie. And it's, I mean, I just find, this is kind of just echoing what you're saying, that people are kind of locked inside of themselves, and if they can, and it's, you know, it's scary to get outside of yourself. But if you can kind of, you know, step outside of yourself, that's when good things happen.
Okay, here's what comes up for me. One, people can change. As cheesy as it may sound, I know it. Two, you're more than the worst thing that you've ever done. Three, if they're willing to do that, what are you willing to do?
Mine's really linked with yours. How to take the red pill. How to take the red pill. How to wake up into bliss. I mean, I just done 18 years of this kind of work. I haven't worked for money for 10 years. I've healed for 7 or 8 hours a day. It's a strange story. And how I feel right now, where I can see who's who, I can see the different levels of intelligence, I can see the shaman healer, I can see the other one over, oh, she's gone. Interesting. It's really fascinating waking up. As Wachowski said, we all know something's wrong, and it's, you know, 15% of the brain working, a third of us dying of cancer in this country, half of us not sleeping, highest rate of teenage pregnancy in Europe, highest rate of hard drug abuse. Come on, you know, we're not, it's not going well. We live in the marketplace. We forgot what to do when you're not buying stuff for your life. And I love the marketplace. I love things. I love clothes. I love this microphone. It feels good. Someone designed it, and I love all that. But I think about the hours I want to spend in my life when I'm not in the marketplace. What I want you to take away from this film, what I want me to take away from it, and us four, the other four, to keep on taking away from it, is to just keep going. Because this is a very, very fast time of evolution. It's very hard, and a lot is changing. And the courage we all must manifest to make whatever collective mystery is going on, and this is where some of you I know I will lose, but I am a poet, so I have that right. I want to lose you in the mythology of this, the mythology you're being taught again and again by the greatest storytellers of our times, and they are on the movie screens now. Lord of the Rings, you know the movies. Star Wars, you know the movies. Joseph Campbell, you know the guys. Read this shit if you haven't. Wake up to the reality that it is love. That's what these guys are doing. Vegas, Vegas, isn't it? Vegas. He just gets reset into love. Dark Cloud gets reset into his love. I have been raging for years because I came through a genocide, except I wasn't there. It happened in the 20s, and half of me suffered it, and I didn't know why. I was the angriest person I'd ever met by such a long way that these guys don't even look angry to me. He'll tell you another day. I've just never hit anyone. If I was wired up with violence, I would be in there too. I'm not. The work works. And I got asked to do this film, and this is one of the greatest honors to be involved with something, because it's beauty, it's light, and it's all of ours. It's our light and it's our beauty.
Can't really follow that. What he said. No, man. It's I mean, we had Vegas here because Vegas is out now, and we had him at a Q&A in Austin when we first screened this. And he said what you guys said. He said if they wanted you to see this, so you can see if they can do it. If the Bloods, the Crips, the Mexican Mafia, all these guys can come together, then what fucking excuse have we got?
None.
You know.
Thank you all.